How much money did you make on that contract?
No, Senator, we're not advising them. Neither.
Did you ever advise them?
Historically, we advised on none of the topics that you had highlighted.
You didn't advise the Chinese Ocean Shipping Company?
Not on the topics you described, Senator.
Why is it a good idea to advise them at all? They're a state-owned enterprise engaged in activity directly contrary to the security interests of this nation.
And they're no longer a client of ours, sir.
Why did you advise on 22 of the 100 biggest Chinese state-owned enterprises?
That number I don't believe is accurate, Senator.
It doesn't have anything to do with money, does it?
I don't believe that number is accurate, Senator.
How much money do you make off the United States government?
I don't know the size of our work with the U.S. government, Senator.
In 2021, you made more than $850 million in consulting work for the federal government with the Department of Defense as your top client. When you bid for those government contracts, did you disclose your work for these Chinese state-owned enterprises that were conducting activity adverse to our national security? Did you disclose it to the Department of Defense?
Senator, we take OCI incredibly seriously and have even gone beyond what is required around disclosures.
So that's a yes?
So I would just, yes or no down the line, I just want to make sure we have this on the record. Is it true that your companies refused to comply with this committee's subpoena, citing an injunction from a Saudi Arabian administrative court, a court that is notoriously not independent and under the direct influence of the Saudi regime? So please, yes or no, we'll start with you, Mr. Lesser.
Senator, we've complied to the extent that we can, given the situation that we're placed in.
So that is a yes, you are taking the Saudi Arabian's court's direction over this congressional direction. Mr. Sternfels.
Senator, we believe we're in the process of complying with this subpoena in this subcommittee and will continue to do so.
But you are still letting the Saudi Arabian court govern how you are complying, if you are complying. Mr. Klein.
Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for calling this hearing. Thanks to the witnesses for being here. Mr. Sternfels, if I could just start with you. Did I hear you say in your opening statement, I'm going to quote you now, we have the industry's most rigorous client selection policy? Did I get that right?
We believe that to be true, Senator.
Well, how is it then that you end up with so many clients who are state-owned Chinese corporations hostile to the United States?
Thank you, Senator. So the basis for my answer was we've invested over $700 million over the last several years to put in place a rigorous client selection process that looks at a whole series of factors.
Well, let's talk about some of your clients. Like the China Communications Construction Company. This is a firm that is blacklisted by the United States government. This is a state-owned enterprise that is responsible for building artificial islands in the South China Sea, probably in direct contravention of international law, certainly in direct contravention to United States security interests. You helped them develop their 5-year plan. Why is that a good idea?
Senator, our work in China overwhelmingly works with multinational companies, including many of those being U.S. And private sector.
No, actually,
Chinese
you've
companies.
advised 22 of the 100 biggest state-owned companies in China. That's according to the New York Times. Let's talk about another one, the Chinese Ocean Shipping Company. That's a state-owned conglomerate that's played a key role in China's naval expansion. I'm quoting from NBC News here. And Beijing's bid to extend its global reach. This company has been given special status by the CCP and forms the core of China's defense industrial base. This company has provided logistical support to the Chinese Navy's escort operations in the Gulf of Aden, and experts say, I'm still quoting, it serves as the maritime logistical arm for the People's Liberation Army. You're advising them. How much money did you make on that contract?
No, Senator, we're not advising them. Neither.
Did you ever advise them?
Historically, we advised on none of the topics that you had highlighted.
You didn't advise the Chinese Ocean Shipping Company?
Not on the topics you described, Senator.
Why is it a good idea to advise them at all? They're a state-owned enterprise engaged in activity directly contrary to the security interests of this nation.
And they're no longer a client of ours, sir.
Why did you advise on 22 of the 100 biggest Chinese state-owned enterprises?
That number I don't believe is accurate, Senator.
It doesn't have anything to do with money, does it?
I don't believe that number is accurate, Senator.
How much money do you make off the United States government?
I don't know the size of our work with the U.S. government, Senator.
In 2021, you made more than $850 million in consulting work for the federal government with the Department of Defense as your top client. When you bid for those government contracts, did you disclose your work for these Chinese state-owned enterprises that were conducting activity adverse to our national security? Did you disclose it to the Department of Defense?
Senator, we take OCI incredibly seriously and have even gone beyond what is required around disclosures.
So that's a yes?
We take it incredibly seriously. We made all appropriate disclosures, Senator. I'm happy to come back to you on any details specific to the work that we do on the Department of Defense.
That is not what news reports have found and news agencies who've looked into this. In fact, to quote NBC News again, in bidding on contracts with the Department of Defense, the U.S. Navy, Customs and Border Protection, you did not disclose your work with Chinese enterprises in apparent conflict of interest. A report in 2021 showed, December 2021, that you admitted to providing services only for provincial and local governments in China, but not for the central government in China. My question is, why should you be able to get any contracts in the United States government? If you're going to advise foreign nations who are hostile to us and make gobs of money off of them, why should you be getting U.S. government contracts?
Senator, we've never worked with the Chinese Communist Party or the central government in China, to the best of my knowledge.
You're working with state-owned enterprises. China's not a democracy. They own these companies. These companies are doing the bidding of the Chinese military, and you're making money off of it, hand over fist. My question is, I guess if you want to do that, I guess it doesn't violate the law, but I just wonder, why is it that you should then be able to turn around and make $850 million in 1 year alone off the American taxpayer? I mean, explain that to me.
Senator, our work with the federal government, we stand behind. We bring...
Well, I'm sure you do. It's incredibly lucrative. That's the problem. You make gobs of money off of our enemies, and then you turn around and you make gobs of money off of us. It's outrageous, frankly. Listen, you shouldn't be doing any work with the Chinese Communist Party and any enterprise that they own or have some share in. You shouldn't. And if you were serious about ethics, you wouldn't be doing it. But it's particularly outrageous that you then make money, almost $1 billion in a year, off the United States government, including the Defense Department. Now, I have introduced a law that would prohibit you from doing just this, and I will continue to push it until we get a vote on it. Now, let me ask you about one other thing, since I've got you here. And I have to tell you, since I represent the state of Missouri that has been absolutely devastated by the opioid crisis. And I know you know a lot about that, because speaking of money, McKinsey has made an unbelievable amount of money off of the opioid crisis. Let me ask you about this New York Times report, which found that McKinsey proposed paying a $14,810 bounty to pharmacies for each opioid overdose. Is McKinsey proud of that work?
Senator, our work was designed to actually reduce opioid abuse.
Really? Let me ask you about this. I think we've got a poster of this. We sell hope in a bottle. This is an advertising campaign you came up with. We sell hope in a bottle. That's for opioids. Hope in a bottle. You help Purdue Pharma market them to children. The Massachusetts Attorney General has filed a lawsuit that has all of these disclosures in it, describing how McKinsey consultants recommended and pushed Purdue to turbocharge OxyContin sales. McKinsey urged the Sacklers, owners of Purdue, to make a clear go, no-go decision to turbocharge the sales engine. The consultants pushed the board of directors to turbocharge the sales engine, to drive up the sale of opioids that is killing people left and right. Is McKinsey proud of that work?
Senator, as I had stated in the House, we were too slow in seeing the epidemic unfold around us.
You helped cause the epidemic.
No, Senator.
Really? You don't think that helped cause the epidemic? You don't think marketing these drugs to doctors and children helped cause the epidemic? You don't think you have any part in that?
Senator, what I can say, including the state of Massachusetts, is we were the first to actually reach a settlement with all states.
Well, sure. I mean, sure. When you're over a barrel, what are you doing for victims right now?
Senator, we've reached agreement with the states and municipalities.
Have you set up a compensation fund? You sharing some of your profits with them?
Senator, the settlement details are public.
No, I'm asking you. I mean, have you set up a compensation fund? Share some of your prodigious profits with the victims
Senator,
whose lives you helped destroy.
Our substantial settlements go to exactly that cause.
You know, I've sat here and I've listened to your responses to my colleagues, and it's the same old thing over and over. You don't want to be accountable for anything that you do. But I tell you what, this is unforgettable and frankly unforgivable. And your work right now, taking money from this government as you help the Chinese Communist Party, is absolutely unforgivable, and I will not rest until it is illegal. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Hawley. Senator Hassan.
Well, I want to thank you, Chairman Blumenthal and Ranking Member Johnson, for holding the hearing and for leading this inquiry into the efforts of the Saudi Arabian Crown Prince to influence U.S. policy and the impacts that it has on our national security. I want to just note for the record that, as Mr. Sternfels well knows, that I join Senator Hawley in my concern about McKinsey's role in the opioid epidemic. We have passed some legislation that needs to be fully implemented to require more transparency in similar situations. But let's turn to the issue at hand today. Congress has a really well-established right to compel documents and testimony, including from United States companies. And I just want to be clear for the public here. The Supreme Court of the United States has held that our Constitution prohibits United States judicial interference with the issuance of congressional subpoenas. So a court in this country can't interfere with congressional subpoenas. So I would just, yes or no down the line, I just want to make sure we have this on the record. Is it true that your companies refused to comply with this committee's subpoena, citing an injunction from a Saudi Arabian administrative court, a court that is notoriously not independent and under the direct influence of the Saudi regime? So please, yes or no, we'll start with you, Mr. Lesser.
Senator, we've complied to the extent that we can, given the situation that we're placed in.
So that is a yes, you are taking the Saudi Arabian's court's direction over this congressional direction. Mr. Sternfels.
Senator, we believe we're in the process of complying with the subpoena in this subcommittee and will continue to do so.
But you are still letting the Saudi Arabian court govern how you are complying, if you are complying. Mr. Klein.
Senator, thank you for the question. We are complying. We intend to comply fully, and we intend to continue to press all avenues to ensure our full compliance.
So that means, I just want to be clear here, if you aren't successful with the Saudi Arabian courts, you're going to fully comply and just decide that the United States Congress has authority over a United States company and that you're going to follow our law. If the Saudi Arabian court doesn't go your way, you're going to still follow the law here and fully comply.
We are entirely hopeful that we will resolve all aspects of the legal issues in Saudi Arabia, and we have intended to comply with this U.S. subpoena from the beginning, and we intend to comply going forward.
I will take that as you will continue to allow the Saudi Arabian Administrative Court to govern your response. And Mr. Kerry.
Senator, we will fully comply with the subcommittee subpoena, and we're accelerating that process every day, but we will fully comply with the subcommittee subpoena.
Regardless of what the Saudi Arabian courts decide.
We will fully comply, Senator.
Okay, just let me be clear for those who didn't give the last answer. By refusing to respond to this committee's subpoena and request for a legal justification for your refusal, your firms appear to have placed your loyalties to Saudi Arabia above your loyalty to the United States of America, our national security, and the principles of transparency. I also heard your discussion about the risk assessments you do before you decide to take on a particular client. And one of the things a good legal department does in a massive company with lots of resources is that they look at the law of the jurisdiction that you want to do business in, and if it says that they might give you trouble with complying with the United States subpoena from this Congress, you might decide not to do business there because that's a high risk. And the fact that you decided anyway seems to me to say that you don't take the authority of this Congress very seriously. So now to Mr. Sternfels and Mr. Lesser. Both McKinsey and Boston Consulting Group do work in China, which, like Saudi Arabia, does not have an independent judiciary. I am concerned that if Congress were to subpoena information from McKinsey or BCG or its work in China or on behalf of the Chinese government, that a Chinese court could also try to block compliance with that subpoena. So to the two of you, if a Chinese court blocked compliance with a congressional subpoena, would you refuse to respond to the subpoena, Mr. Lesser? Yes or no?
Senator, we're doing everything we can to reply to this subpoena as fully as we can, and specific to China, we do and don't do.
So if a
Be
Chinese
very
court
careful.
tried to block your compliance with the subpoena, you would ignore the Chinese court or do your best to get them to change their mind, but ultimately you would comply with the subpoena from this Congress regardless of what the position of the Chinese government is.
Senator, we do our best to comply in every situation and follow the laws of all the countries in which we work. That is what we have tried to do here, and we are incredibly respectful of this subcommittee and its subpoena, and we are continuing to work to be able to fully meet your requests.
So let me ask Mr. Sternfels, again, the Chinese government tells you you may not comply with the subpoena from the United States Congress. What are you going to do?
Thank you, Senator. And I'd start with the reaffirming we don't work with the federal government in China. We have very tight client selection policies.
All right, I'm going to stop you just because my time is limited. The Chinese government runs the businesses in China. So let's just be very clear about the line you're trying to draw just isn't there. So now, again, my time is limited, and I have one more question for you, Mr. Sternfels. So will you cooperate with an investigation with a subpoena from Congress, even if the Chinese government says no?
Absolutely, Senator. Cooperating with this Senate is our highest priority, and we will continue to do so.
Well, if that is true, then you need to respond fully to this committee's subpoena. Because right now, what we see is a refusal to cooperate with this investigation, and that sets a really dangerous precedent, which again leads me, my colleagues, and the American public to question the loyalties of your company. Now, I have one more quick question, if I could, and it really is just a follow-on to Senator Hawley. I've led oversight and legislative efforts to bring greater transparency to conflicts of interest from groups like McKinsey in the wake of your failure to disclose your work for opioid producers while simultaneously advising the Food and Drug Administration on opioid regulations. Once again, here, McKinsey is failing to be transparent in its work, and in this case, it has significant implications for our national security. You talked with Senator Hawley about your receipts from government contracts. I know that in fiscal year 2023, you had tens of millions of dollars of proceeds from our defense industry and from national security agencies such as the U.S. Department of Defense. So I have to tell you that I am deeply skeptical that McKinsey's work is compatible with United States national security interests, especially given that your work has been linked to alleged human rights abuses in Saudi Arabia and supporting a Chinese state-owned enterprise that constructs military installments in the South China Sea. At the end of the day, what the American people want to know is whether American companies will put American national interests before anyone else's. And the reason you are all here today is because your response to these subpoenas seems to really call that into question. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Senator Hassan. Just to follow up on a couple of the questions that Senator Hassan asked, let me just make clear, you answered the question about China when I asked it, essentially saying your position would be the same. And I think that answer is essentially the same as you gave to Senator Hassan, because doing your best, as you put it, Mr. Lesser, or cooperating, as you put it, Mr. Sternfeld, is not complying with the subpoena. I hate to talk here like a lawyer, but these distinctions really make a difference. And we will potentially see in court how much of a difference they make. And the fact that your position would be the same in response to a Department of Justice subpoena or an SEC subpoena simply shows the consequence, really the magnitude of the issue that concerns us here. And I recognize and I sympathize with your concern for your employees, and I am concerned also. And I just have to ask each of you, don't you have second thoughts about doing business with a client, a country that says it's going to throw your employees in jail for obeying American law? Mr. Lesser.
Senator, this whole experience, going back 6 months now, has been unprecedented for us. And as we understand from our lawyers, an unprecedented disagreement where a Senate subpoena is in direct conflict with the laws of another country that views the information to be confidential. We are all navigating uncharted waters here, and we are doing it in the spirit of being as compliant as possible. And I'm still hopeful that we will get to a resolution that will work to meet your needs and respect the laws there, so that we're not, so that we can move forward in a positive way. And that's the spirit that we've operated in since the beginning, but it is unprecedented. And when this whole experience is over, of course, we'll look at what we've learned from it and how we can avoid a similar situation in the future. But it has been an extraordinarily difficult one for our entire team to navigate, and we think quite unprecedented in the history of the relationship with Senate subpoenas and the laws of other countries.
Mr. Sternfeld.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We remain optimistic that we can avoid any of the outcomes that you talk about.
But don't you have second thoughts about doing business with a country that says not just, oh, well, we'll try to arbitrate our differences, we'll try to settle our differences in court? No, it's our way, or we put your people in prison. Doesn't that give you some qualms?
Senator, I remain hopeful that we don't get to that scenario, that we can keep working.
But that's what they've told you, correct?
Senator, we've faced an injunction, and the injunction has potential penalties. No one has said that. We look at the injunction. We're hopeful we can avoid that. And I do come back to my commitment that I made to you personally and the entire subcommittee, that we will continue to comply with the subpoena. We don't think we're done here. And we will continue to advance both in submission of materials and reduction in those redactions that you pointed out.
Mr. Klein.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I agree with you. This is extraordinarily troubling, troubling for us and unprecedented, and it does give great pause for thought. We have a responsibility as a transactional advisor to complete the work we've done for commitments we've made. In addition, we look very carefully at the actions of the PIF over the length of our relationship. And as I indicated and will continue to indicate, this is an aberrant situation. Our work has been best practices, best governance, strong data-driven investment historically. We have been presented with a statement by the PIF that they believe they have certain sovereign rights that are limiting their ability and has put them in this position of this particular court case. But it is intensely troubling, and we share your concern.
Mr. Kerry.
Senator, our work is filed under far rights, transparent. I'm very confident that we will have satisfied the subcommittee in full compliance. And I just don't think we get there, Senator, in terms of those consequences.
Well, I can tell you, you know, I've been a prosecutor, I've been a private lawyer. I'm not sure I would work for a client that said to me, you comply with American law and we'll throw you in prison for work done on an American investment in America under American law with the protections of rights that America guarantees. Let me ask you, Mr. Sternfels, we know that McKinsey advised the PIF on Project Wedge before the launch of Live Golf. What is Project Wedge?
Well, thank you, Senator. You are correct. We advised the PIF on Project Wedge. This was work conducted in 2021, and it was about 6 months worth of work. There were 2 phases to this. It focused on the economic viability of standing up a new golf league. Right? This was before the creation of LIV. It was before any discussions between the PGA and LIV. But the question that we were asked is, could a new golf league be economically viable? And we conducted business case analysis around those set of questions, Senator.
You also worked on the Lucid Motor deal?
I'm not familiar with that, Senator.
Aside from Project Wedge and Live Golf and Lucid, what other deals have you worked on?
Senator, as I had mentioned in my opening statement, the vast majority of work that we do with the PIF relates to investments in Saudi Arabia. We conducted a thorough research to find any work that we've done that would have any intersection with the United States, and we found 3. They related to the topics of carbon credits, carbon capture, and healthcare. And to the best of my knowledge, Senator, none yielded any investment in the United States.
Let me ask you, did any of those projects, including Project Wedge, involve Saudi Arabian national security?
In terms of what we were asked, Senator, not to my knowledge. We were focused on a business case analysis, sir.
Did your work for Saudi Arabia or PIF regarding the PGA Tour or Live Golf involve national security?
Senator, as I had stated, our work did not involve Live Golf or the PGA Tour. We were involved well before the creation. It was focused on, agnostically, could a new golf league be economically viable?
Mr. Lesser, has any of your work involved Saudi Arabian national security?
Senator, from the standpoint of our look at our work, as we described, this was normal BCG work that we would do for an asset owner, a sovereign wealth fund.
But it didn't involve national security, did it? I mean, weapon systems or troop movements or classified information?
No, Senator, that was not the nature of our work.
Mr. Klein, any of your work involve national security?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We serve as investment bankers. We have not done any work on national security issues.